Hello everyone, FPL Raptor here and welcome back to another video on my YouTube channel. In today's video, I'll be doing an early prediction of the 2023-24 Premier League table. Now, it is an early prediction, a lot of transfers yet to take place, so if you're watching this later and it all looks terribly wrong, that is why. But I love doing these kind of things in real life, and I thought, why not try and bring it to YouTube? If you guys don't like it and don't want to watch it, I won't do it again in the future. But if you do enjoy it, it could be another type of video that we do throughout the season, some prediction-based things, some general look at football rather than specific FPL. So please let me know down below in the comments, do you enjoy these kind of videos? Interact throughout, guess alongside with me, tell me where you disagree, tell me where you agree, and I would love to know some feedback from you and how I can improve these videos in the future. But without further ado, let's jump into it. So the graphics are not going to be particularly fancy today. You're going to see the table alongside me, and I'm just going to basically reveal in groups. So we're going to look at the relegated teams, in my opinion, first, then the ones that had just escaped relegation mid-table, as you can see by the colour scheme, and look at it together in groups. A couple of quick caveats. Like I said at the start, this is a very early prediction. Tons of transfers yet to take place. Maybe we'll readdress it closer to the start of the season. That is the first caveat. The second caveat is predicting this is so difficult. If you've done it in the past, it is so incredibly difficult because you get one team wrong and all of a sudden the rest of the teams are wrong, and there are always surprises, both good and bad. There's always one or two, maybe three or four teams that really surprise us positively, for example Fulham last season, and then there are always teams that really surprise us by potentially getting relegated or just about staying up. Leicester are probably an example of a team that we didn't expect to struggle so much last season. So do take this all with a pinch of salt. This is more for entertainment and fun than anything else. But what I would love is down below in the comments, I would like you to tell me where you agree and disagree with me, and also maybe try and predict the table yourself, and then you can come back to your comment later in the season. So we're going to start in 20th with Luton. Now, this is a team that I would love to stay up because it would be an absolute fairy tale story. I mean, they are still working on their stadium at the moment, which they're absolutely struggling with. In fact, just before recording this, their game week 2 fixture against Burnley is probably going to be postponed because the stadium still isn't ready. So I would love for them to stay up, but I worry a lot about them just because I don't think they have the strength in comparison to the other two newly promoted teams and the teams that are currently in the Premier League. And when I looked into the data a bit more, because I'll be honest, I didn't watch a massive amount of Championship last season, only a few games, I was surprised at how little they scored. So I've got the stats here. They only scored 57 goals last season, which was significantly less than Burnley's 87 and Sheffield United's 73. And they were also very poor at home, which I was shocked at. A team like Luton you would expect to be quite strong at home. They are actually 9th in the Championship for home form, which is pretty poor for them. When a team comes up to the Premier League, you really expect them to make their home ground a fortress. So unless they can turn that around and make it very, very difficult for teams to go to them, I do think they'll struggle. And to be honest, I think you could justify anyone in from sort of 20th to 12th staying up. And you could also justify anyone from sort of 20th to 12th getting relegated to. I found it really, really difficult. So unfortunately, I'm very sorry, Luton fans. I've got them in 20th. So in 19th, I have Bournemouth. Now, I feel like this is a team that could come back to bite me, and that at the end of the season, I'll say they definitely did better than I predicted. The reason for that is the new manager that has just come in and taken over from Gary O'Neill is Iraola. Now, he seems to be, from what I've heard, very, very highly rated in La Liga. He had 3 seasons at Rayo Vallecano, newly promoted, then 12th, then 11th. So by all accounts, he's done very, very well there with what I understand to be a very mediocre team. He spoke about when he came to Bournemouth how he likes the idea of being the underdogs and having to prove himself. And I feel like he says all of the right things in his interviews. Now, I haven't watched a massive amount of La Liga or Rayo Vallecano, so I can't confirm that myself. But it seems pretty exciting. They've made a few decent signings too. And what I love about Rayo Vallecano last season is they actually beat Real Madrid and they beat Barcelona. So this is a manager that knows how to take what is probably an underwhelming team in comparison to a lot of teams in the league and actually do very well with them and beat some of the bigger teams. So by all accounts, he does seem like a very exciting manager that will play very exciting football. It's just how long does it take to get them there? And do they have the strength to be able to play the football that he wants them to? Like I said, they have made 3 very exciting signings, including Traore from the Serie A and also Kluivert too. So they are making the right signings. They struggled last season to score goals at points. They're signing the right players. It has been a very fruitful summer thus far, and I do think they could do okay. I'm just looking at the teams above them, and at the moment, in my personal opinion, I think the other teams have much better, stronger teams in general, and a lot better squad depth as well. So for me, it's just a matter of the other teams being slightly stronger, rather than thinking that Bournemouth are absolute stinkers and they're going to really struggle. I was impressed at points last season, but for now, I've got them in 19th. In 18th, I have Wolves. Now, this is a tricky one because only a couple of years ago, they finished 7th in the Premier League. Now, they have been a way off of that in the last couple of seasons. And to be honest, they have looked absolutely shocking every time I watch them. Wolves fans, let me know what you think down below in the comments. Are you hopeful that Lopetegui can turn it around? Are you hopeful that you'll have a really strong season? you've only really sold players at the moment. I haven't seen a massive amount of signings coming in. I haven't even really seen Wolves linked with that many players either. You've sold Neves, you've sold Traore too. It looks to me like a team that is looking even weaker than last season. And last season at points, I think you really, really struggled. So I am quite worried for Wolves and maybe slightly bold to predict them to go down. But for me, again, I just see teams above them that just have more squad depth, better qualities, and are on an upward trajectory as opposed to a downward trajectory. As I'm recording this, there are rumours that Jose Sarr, their goalkeeper, is being sold. Now, he did make quite a few mistakes last season. I know they have Bentley coming in as well, who could be a top goalkeeper, but it just looks like players are leaving constantly. And I actually dug into the data as well for all of the Premier League teams here to get a bit of a better idea objectively how they did last season. Wolves were comfortably 20th for expected goals. So they were by far and away the worst attack in the Premier League. They created 0 chances. And yes, they could go out and sign more players from an attacking perspective, and it could allow them to create more chances. But if you're not creating chances in the Premier League and you're not defending overly well either, you will struggle to stay up. And I think regardless of where Wolves finish, I do think that it will be a battle. And I don't think they're going to finish mid-table in my personal opinion. I think it will be somewhere between kind of 19th and 15th if I had to guess. And at the moment, I am guessing they're going to go down. I get a bit of a similar vibe to Southampton. We started to get the idea that while Southampton had been in the Premier League a long time, they were slowly on a downward trajectory. It just looked like last year could be the year that they went down. A lot of people predicted it. And I think it's a very similar situation with Wolves. In my opinion, they are a Premier League side, and it feels weird now thinking about Wolves being back in the Championship. But for me, I just don't think they're strong enough. So that is the bottom 3 in my opinion. Luton, Bournemouth, Wolves. Let me know down below in the comments which 3 teams do you think will be relegated from the Premier League. So in 17th, 16th and 15th, I have Sheffield United, Fulham and Nottingham Forest. I think the latter 2 teams there, a lot of people will be surprised because they're probably predicting them to finish mid-table, but I will explain my reasoning for that. Sheffield United are probably a team that a lot of people are predicting to go down. I wouldn't be surprised if they do, but I see a lot about them that I like. Number one, they have a lot of experience in the Premier League, a lot of their players. Not necessarily the best experience, but a lot of that team were in the Premier League. They stayed on in the Championship, and now they've bounced straight back. They've got a little bit of experience there. And in comparison to maybe Burnley and some other teams in the Prem, they do have quite a slightly older team, and they have quite a lot of experience in that team. And I think that will hold them in good stead as well. I don't necessarily expect them to comfortably be above the relegation zone, but I am at the moment predicting them to just about beat it. The other thing that I like about Sheffield United, they were very strong at home. In comparison to Luton, who struggled a little bit at points, Sheffield United were actually second in the league for home form. They actually won 16 of their 23 games, and they averaged over 2 goals per game at home as well. So if they can make their home ground a fortress, and if it is difficult for teams to go there, in a similar way to what we saw from Nottingham Forest at the City Ground last season, it makes it so much easier because you don't really need to win many of your away games. I mean, we'll get on to Forest in a second. They had terrible away form, but because they won so many games at home and picked up so many points, it made it a very strong campaign for them. So I like it for that reason. I do think that Sheffield United will just about stay up, but again, I would not be surprised if most of you in the comments do predict them to go down. Now, in 16th is probably going to be one of the biggest shocks of the video for you watching, and one that I know a lot of people would disagree with, and that is putting Fulham down in 16th. They actually finished 10th last season, so a top half of the table. It was an exceptionally strong season for them, but it was a slow decline after the World Cup. They started the season on fire, and then they started to struggle quite a lot. Obviously, Mitrovic's ban didn't help them in that regard, but I actually looked into the data once again, and I wasn't particularly impressed. So they were actually bottom of the league, again, quite comfortably, for expected goals conceded. They conceded a ton of shots, a ton of big chances, and Leno bailed them out on several occasions, and potentially the teams finishing quite poorly against them bailed them out too. So yes, they scored quite a few goals, and yes, they weren't bad going forward. We're looking at about a mid-table team. Their defensive form does worry me. They haven't necessarily strengthened massively defensively. I know Leno is an absolutely brilliant keeper, but they can't keep relying on him too much. Also, it looks like Mitrovic could be off to Saudi. There are actually rumours that Marco Silva could be off with him, and it looks like West Ham are trying to pick up Paulinho, and a lot of other people looking into him too. So I worry a little bit that they look like they could be losing a few key players. If they lose their manager as well, I really do rate Marco Silva. That would worry me even more. So at the moment, I am predicting Fulham to finish 16th. I would not be shocked to see them relegated this season as a bit of a surprise. If I'm predicting one team to be a surprise relegation, it would be Fulham. But equally, if they finish 12th, 13th, again, I wouldn't be overly surprised. I don't expect them to challenge for the top half. I don't think they've got that in them this season. Apologies, Fulham fans. In 15th, I have Nottingham Forest. Now, again, this one, looking at other predictions, seems to be a bit of a surprise. A lot of people putting Nottingham Forest in 12th, in 13th, expecting them to have a stronger season than this season. I don't necessarily see a massive amount of that. I'm really worried about their away form. So they were exceptionally good at home. Everyone can see that. I actually went to watch Liverpool versus Nottingham Forest at the City Ground when Forest won 1-0. One of the best atmospheres in a stadium I have ever seen. But their away form is stinky. I mean, it absolutely sucks. They only won one game last season away from home, and they only picked up a total of 9 points. So we are, by all accounts, looking at a very bad team away from home. It is as simple as this with Forest. If they do not improve their away form, they will be relegated because they had such good home form last season. To replicate that will be very, very tricky. And also, a lot of teams had poor seasons in the Premier League. I think the only reason Forest weren't relegated is because there were some teams that did even worse than them. In any other normal season, they were very, very close to relegation on the amount of points and wins that they had. So I love Forest. I live in Nottingham myself, so I've got a bit of a soft spot for them. I love Steve Cooper. I am slightly worried though. So at the moment, I'm predicting them to stay up because I do think they'll improve their away form slightly, but they do definitely need to improve it, and they need to improve it from the start, because what they don't want to get is on a run of 4, 5, 6 losses in a row away from home. And again, you lose that confidence away from home, and it can be very, very difficult to travel as a result. So those are 7th, 17th, 16th and 15th. Potentially a few surprises. Let's now take a look at that sort of mid-table top half of the bottom half and see which teams are there for me. So next we have the teams that I've got finishing 14th to 11th. And these are the teams that in my head, the reason they're like in like a new colour group is they are relatively comfortable with respect to relegation, but they're not challenging towards that kind of Europa League top half of the table position. So I would expect there to be a bit of a gap between kind of Forest and then the next group, but not a massive gap. And I don't think they're quite challenging those top 10 teams. So in 14th, I've got Everton. Now, I did ask on Twitter a few days ago, which teams do you predict to go down? I would say probably over half had Everton in there. For me, it's just Sean Dyche. I do think he's absolutely excellent. And I know he's only done that at Burnley, and Everton are a new team, but I still back him as a manager, and I feel like he gets the job done. He doesn't tend to go above and beyond, although he has, obviously, at points in the Prem, but I wouldn't expect them to be world beaters this season, Everton. But I look at the quality that they've got under a very sturdy quality manager, and I just don't think they have the team to go down. I know they struggled last season at points, but Pickford, Tarkowski, Keane, Gray, McNeil, DCL, these aren't world beaters, like I said, but they are players that are Premier League quality, and I would expect them to have enough to stay up. The only caveat I would say is that they don't have a lot of strength in the attack. I think it's absolutely critical that Calvert-Lewin stays fit. If they don't have Calvert-Lewin fit, at the moment they've only got Neil Maupay, who is not, in my opinion, a Premier League quality striker, or definitely not enough to stay up. There are a lot of rumours about them signing further depth up top, and I think they need that, because even at the moment there are rumours that Calvert-Lewin is not quite fit enough to play the pre-season games. The names that I've seen them linked with are actually pretty good. There's Elanga, and I'm a Manchester United fan. I don't overly rate Elanga, but I feel like he's definitely good enough to play at Everton. Danjuma, obviously we saw him in the Prem a little bit. Danjuma could be an excellent signing. And El Bilal Toure as well looks like another person that could be coming to Everton. So they have been suited to be signing potentially one forward option. And if they do that, I do think that will massively help their chances. Regardless, I think Sean Dyche will do enough. And at the moment, I've got Everton in 14th. Wouldn't be surprised if they get a few injuries to see them a little bit closer to the relegation zone. In 13th, I have the highest newly promoted team, and that is Burnley. And I'm surprised there's no real surprise here. Burnley are the team that a lot of people are saying are going to be the best of the newly promoted sides. I mean, Vincent Kompany did a hell of a job. I watched a bit of a highlights reel. I know that's not as good as watching the entire games. I watched a bit of a highlights reel of Burnley, and my God, the football that he's got them playing is absolutely exceptional. And I don't think that Kompany will be naive necessarily. So I understand that he likes to play this attacking football. This is not the Burnley of old, but I also don't expect him to just completely play exactly the way they did in the Championship. I think he will adapt slightly. Of course, given his background too, he's got a lot of Premier League experience, not as a manager, but he does have it as a player. And again, being a defensive-minded player too, I feel like he will keep them pretty tight at the back. So by all accounts, I do think that Burnley will stay in the Premier League. I think they'll have a good season. They might drop a little bit lower if they do struggle to adapt to the Premier League. The only slight worry is maybe like in comparison to Sheffield United, who have quite an experienced team, this current Burnley team doesn't have that many in comparison to other teams, Premier League experienced players. They have a few from their other Premier League campaign, but there's not a great deal. So I would worry slightly that they're a little bit inexperienced, but I think Kompany will do enough. I really like the look of it, and it'll be exciting to see Burnley in the Premier League playing top quality attacking football. So moving on to West Ham, I find them a very, very tricky one to predict, because 2 seasons ago they finished 7th, obviously qualified for European football as well, then went on to win a European competition last season. But by all accounts, last season in the Premier League, they were extremely underwhelming, and at points they were very, very close to getting relegated. I mean, at points they were actually in the relegation zone. There was lots of talk about David Moyes being sacked at various points, and not only were you not picking up points, but it was absolutely atrocious, the performances too, and it just looked completely different to the season before that. But I would love to know what you think down below in the comments, especially if you're a West Ham fan. What on earth is going to happen with you this season? Because your team isn't the deepest in the world, and I do worry that you've sold Declan Rice, and at the moment, I know you've been linked to the likes of Paulinho. There are a few options that you've been looking at. It's not Declan Rice, and I do definitely worry about West Ham, that they've lost easily their best player. They haven't necessarily at the moment strengthened in the positions that they need to either. So it's definitely a big transfer window for West Ham. The reason that I've got them in 12th is even after last season when they struggled, they still won a European Cup and they still finished the season okay to a point where they were around mid-table. The season before that, really good. They've got the quality in their team. They've also got David Moyes, who is a very, very good experienced manager. I can't see them having any issues with relegation. I just don't see them challenging for the top half just due to the European commitments and also a bit of what we saw last season. So West Ham in 12th, I think you'd probably be happy, West Ham fans, finishing around mid-table and hopefully going deep in the European competitions. In 11th, I've got Crystal Palace. Now, they finished 11th last season, but I still feel like this might be an unpopular one because people just don't tend to like Crystal Palace. I was shocked that they sacked Vieira for what it's worth. I didn't like that at all. I think they should have kept a hold of him, although the performances were absolutely dire. So I do kind of understand it, but I'm backing them to finish exactly where they finished last season, but maybe have a slight improvement in their performances because I think they've just got, in a similar way to what I said with West Ham, I feel like they've got too much quality to struggle and get anywhere close to relegation, but I don't think they're quite there with respect to their squad depth and positions all over the pitch strong enough to sort of challenge for the European places. So I've got them in 11th. I love Elise, I love Eze, I like Mitchell, Gahey, Anderson, I like Johnson in goal, Mateta, Edouard. I feel like they have some really exciting players. It's about gelling them together, and it's also about keeping them fit as well. Elise was injured for several weeks and months last season, and I feel like that massively impacts them because Elise is their creative player. I feel like Eze has a very, very important season ahead because it looks like, anyway, at the moment of me recording this, that Zaha will not be signing on with Crystal Palace, and as a result, Eze is going to need to be the talisman for them. I actually think it might help them, Zaha leaving, because they're going to have to spread the responsibility a little bit, but I do think it will be Eze that picks it up and drives the team forward and is the one that leads them as a team. And I know he's young, but I feel like he has that in his locker. So I am backing them to have a good season. Hopefully they make a couple of signings, start the season strong. I like Crystal Palace and I would like to see them start to challenge towards the top half of the table. So only one team we're looking at here, and that is Brentford in 10th. Now the reason for that is I see them very much as separating the two halves of the table. Not because they are dead in the middle of the table, but the teams above them I think are, in my opinion, comfortably better than Brentford for this season. But the teams below them, I don't think that Brentford will struggle to compete with. So I would not be surprised, we'll address this at the end of the season, see if it's correct. I would not be surprised to see 6-7 points before Brentford in the team above, and then 6-7 points below them for the team below. I just feel like they are in a sort of a position of their own at the moment, smack bang in 10th. And I feel like they might have had enough to challenge for the European places had Tony not had the suspension. Now, they are a good side, and when I look at Brentford's entire team, I was looking at their starting 11 earlier, I don't see a single position that they are weak in when Tony's there. However, Tony is so important to them, both as an outlet for when they are struggling with pressure, but also to go and attack teams as well. Tony is really, really good on the press. He's also good at running behind. He's just got a bit of everything, and he's also an exceptional penalty taker too, so when they have penalties, he tends to score. I feel like it is a massive loss, and I know he's back in January, so it's not for the entire season, but unless they have a really strong start, I feel like they could end up struggling. Tony might come back and then they might pick up a few points, and I expect them to finish around 10th, 11th-ish, with a few teams below them, a few teams above them. I think that the reason that I rate them so much is not only the team that they've got, but also Thomas Frank. I think he is an absolutely top manager. One of those managers, when you watch him in interviews, you just think, yes, I agree with absolutely all of that. And I don't necessarily think that they'll struggle too much without Tony. I'm not expecting Brentford at Christmas to be in like the relegation zone. They do have Vissa, they have Mbermo as well. They have enough quality in the attack to score goals and to create chances. It's just not the same as losing what, in my opinion, is probably a top 4 or 5 striker in the Premier League. Let me know down below how you think Brentford will deal without Tony. But for that reason, I've got them solidly in 10th. And I think if they do finish 10th, with having Tony missing for the first half of the season, I think Brentford fans will be relatively happy with that. And then the season after that, maybe go on and challenge for the European places. So in 8th and 9th, I have Brighton and Aston Villa. Now, these are, in my opinion, two teams that can comfortably challenge for the top 4 if they have a good run this season. My only slight concern is the fact that they are both playing European football for the first time in a long time, and neither team have brilliant squad depth. They do have better squad depth than some of the teams lower, which is why I've still got them finishing fairly well. But a few key injuries, and they're starting to look a little bit in trouble. I think Brighton probably have better offensive squad depth, and then I would say maybe Aston Villa have slightly better defensive squad depth, but they still have a little bit there. But it's a different beast playing regular European football, especially on a Thursday, and then being expected to come back around at the weekend and play Premier League games. I do think that both teams might take a little bit of adapting, but I still feel like they have enough to finish in the top half of the table. This is nothing against Aston Villa and Brighton. I just feel like the likes of Newcastle, Man United, Chelsea, Spurs, etc. have enough in their locker, especially with Chelsea not even playing European football this year. I feel like they have enough to finish above these two teams. However, I would not be surprised at all to see them challenging for the top four. And if I was to predict one of the teams to challenge for the top four, I think it would be Aston Villa, because since Emery came in, they have been so good. And I know Brighton have too, but I just get this weird feeling that Emery at Aston Villa just feels like the most perfect match. And he just looks like a hyper-focused man at the moment, trying to get the very best out of that team. My only slight concern with them is they were very reliant on Ollie Watkins last year. And we've seen at points that Ollie Watkins isn't the most consistent player. He has gone through quite dry spells at points. So hopefully they get some support for him, or that he can just continue to have that form in the Premier League. But both teams, but maybe Brighton in particular, also have quite young teams. And I think it's quite exciting for the future. You've just got to hope that you hang on to De Zerbi and Emery. I would love to know down below in the comments, if you are a Brighton or Aston Villa fan, would you be happy with 9th or 8th? Or are you expecting to finish in the top 7? And if you are expecting to finish in the top 7, which teams that I've currently got there do you think that you'll displace this season? I think this might be a fairly unpopular one, but I've got Newcastle currently finishing in 7th. Now, again, I would not be surprised in the slightest to see them finish in the top 4 again, but I would equally not be surprised to see them potentially even finish slightly lower. This, in a similar way to what we said with Brighton and Aston Villa, is their first season in a long time in European football. And I look at that Newcastle team, and for what is a very strong starting 11, I am not overly impressed by the squad depth. I think the only position they have really good squad depth in is the striking position when both Isak and Wilson is fit. However, we've seen in the past they might actually play them together. And both of them are quite injury prone, as we saw at points last season. So I wouldn't be surprised to see them either play together or at all points one of them be injured. I just have a bit of, this is more of a gut feeling than the data, because the data was really strong both in attack and defense last season. They were in the top 4 for expected goals, and they were in the top 4 for expected goals conceded. I've just got a bit of a gut feeling that we'll see a very subtle, like a 5 to 10% drop off from Newcastle. But it's more so that the teams that struggled last season, Liverpool, Spurs, Chelsea, I think we'll see a slight improvement from. And I think those two coupled, if we see a 10% improvement from those teams and a 10% decrease from Newcastle, that might be enough to just have them switch place. So it's really nothing against Newcastle. I thought they were excellent last season. I just think when I was watching a few of their games, they won quite a few games 1-0. And it was impressive, and they deserved, don't get me wrong here, they deserved to win those games 1-0. But you want to try and win a few more games comfortably. And there were quite a few points last season where they just about scraped through. In another season, if they were slightly unlucky, that's the sort of thing that could be the difference between like 12 to 15 points. So I've just got a bit of a gut feeling that there'll be a bit of a drop-off from Newcastle. I do apologise if you're a Newcastle fan. I would not be surprised to see you finish top 4. I've got them in 7th, which means that the top 6 is the traditional top 6. So let's see who I've got in 6th and 5th. So I've got 5th and 6th, Spurs and Chelsea. You could put them in either position. To be honest, I don't really know which way these will go around. And I also think that one of these teams could surprise us in a really positive way. And I wouldn't be surprised if one of the teams actually surprises us in a negative way. Realistically, Chelsea have to improve. Unless they're looking at getting relegated, there's got to be some kind of improvement from Chelsea. And I would say in a similar manner with Spurs, although Spurs had a slightly better season if we're looking at points picked up and their position in the Premier League table. I've currently got Chelsea ahead of Spurs just because I'm such a massive fan of Pochettino. That isn't to say I'm not a fan of Postecoglou. I just don't know enough about him. I haven't watched enough of him. In fact, I've watched zero of him as a manager. I've watched zero of his team. So it's more just a known entity in Pochettino and just loving the way that Spurs played under him. If he can replicate that at Chelsea, and I feel like he has the personnel to do that, I back Chelsea to do quite well. My main worry with Chelsea is that with all of the signings and the players going out, they still don't really, for me, have an out-and-out striker that will go and get you goals. I know Nkunku could be exciting. They've got Jackson too. They've made some signings there. They've got some players that can score goals that might not leave. I just don't see that obvious goal scorer in their team. That's what they've been missing. But Pochettino can work his magic. I do think that if he can revive the likes of Raheem Sterling in that Chelsea team, he is a goal scorer. I mean, he scored so many goals for Man City under Pep. A lot of them tap-ins, of course, but he is a goal scorer and he can grab them for you. So I'm backing Poch to do fairly well. The other thing that I love about Chelsea, I'm not going to discuss what I think about it because it seems a bit dodgy, but they've made a lot of sales. They've sold a lot of their players, now over 240 million euros in sales they've made. So they've freed up a lot of their wage bill, they've freed up a lot of budget, and they can now go after some important players. I know they are in the process of signing Caicedo, although apparently Liverpool are now in for Caicedo, but if Chelsea can wrap that up, which hopefully they can for them, that is a massive signing because they've lost Kante now. Kante hasn't really been at it for the last couple of years. Caicedo would be an excellent replacement for him in defensive midfield. So I would be excited if I was a Chelsea fan. You've got a top manager that plays attacking football, that likes to trust the youth, that could probably revive a lot of the players in that team. It's just whether they can stay fit and how long it takes him to implement his philosophy, especially with the likes of Reece James and Chilwell, two incredibly important players to the way Pochettino will want to play. Reece James already looks like he's struggling with a knee injury. Chilwell looks very fit at the moment, but he struggled so much last season. So I think it is very dependent on a few key players staying fit, but I like the look of Chelsea. And Spurs, everyone's very, very excited by Postecoglou. He looks like he plays very, very good football. Looks like it'll be a switch to a back four, which is away from what they've been playing recently. A lot of the players that have been bought for Spurs, maybe bought for a five at the back, the likes of Pedro Porro, slightly better in a wing-back formation. If they can hang on to Harry Kane, I think they will be challenging for Champions League football. At the very least, they may even get top four. You've got to think that is an incredible front three and a number 10. They've got Maddison in the number 10 role now, Kulusevski, Kane, and Son. That front four is exceptionally good. Their defense at the moment is okay. If they can keep them all fit and Postecoglou can implement that four at the back formation and they understand what positions they need to be in, I feel like it's fine. Midfield may be lacking slightly, but I still feel like it is just about strong enough. So I feel like by all accounts, it is a strong team. Again, it's in a similar way to Pochettino. Just how long does it take to implement the new philosophy and how quick do the players buy into it? But at the moment, I've got Chelsea and Spurs in 5th and 6th. Would not be surprised to see them higher or lower, though. Let's move on to the top four. So in fourth, I actually have my own club, which is Manchester United, and it saddens me to put us in fourth because I would love to try and put us higher. I just don't think that we currently have that at the moment. I do think we're improving. I think it's great that Ten Hag's had a full season now, and I expect him to continue to improve our team and to improve as a manager in the Premier League. I think that we have made two excellent signings in Onana and Mount, and at the time of recording this, we haven't 100% signed Onana, but it looks very likely. I love looking at statistics. As you'll know if you've watched my channel for a while, I love underlying data. I actually look at underlying data for clubs quite a lot. Two of the things that Manchester United struggled with most last season in comparison to teams around us was passing out of the back. De Gea just didn't do enough of it. And also progressing the ball through the centre of the pitch. We relied quite often on getting the ball out to Luke Shaw and on some cases Wan-Bissaka, which is worrying, and also Dalot. We just don't go through the centre enough, which is interesting because we've got Lisandro Martinez there, who is one of the best ball players in the world from a centre-back position that can play the ball out. De Gea just didn't pass him. So Onana to Lisandro Martinez to Mason Mount. Mason Mount's one of his best attributes is a ball carrier and progressive ball passes as well. So I feel like we are improving the spine of our team. We're improving the way that we can play out from the back. The issue that we've got is that we've still got no one to finish the chances that we create. So Bruno Fernandes actually created 119 chances in the Premier League last season, which was the most chances in the Premier League, more than the likes of De Bruyne, Ødegaard, anyone else in the Prem. Bruno Fernandes was top. No one finishes them. I mean, the amount of expected assists that this man accumulates is ridiculous. And yes, Marcus Rashford had a very good season, but we need a number 9 that finishes chances because Anthony is not a goal scorer. Jadon Sancho is not a goal scorer. Mason Mount is not a goal scorer. And whoever we play through the middle, whether that's Rashford through the middle and then Garnacho on the left, none of these players, in my opinion, even Marcus Rashford, are natural goal scorers. And it's about time we had someone that could finish the chances that Bruno Fernandes creates. So I am a little bit worried that even the players that we are linked with, none of them seem ready to come in and score goals. We need the likes of a Kane or an Osimhen. We don't need a young striker with limited experience that can rotate in for the odd game. So it worries me slightly. I think what is most likely at the moment, unless he goes to Bayern, is we wait one more season for Harry Kane, which is brilliant because we get Harry Kane, but it's not brilliant because we have to go another season without having a main number 9 in our team that can finish goals proven in the Premier League. So I am slightly worried about that. If we did sign a striker such as a Kane or an Osimhen, then I would look at it and say, yeah, do you know what? I would probably put us in third and I would say we'd have more of a chance of challenging. I still feel like we're a little way off though. So I would be happy-ish with fourth as a Manchester United fan. I'd be happier with third or second, but let's move on to third and discuss why I've put them there. As much as it saddens me, I do have Liverpool finishing above us at the moment. It's just the way that they finished last season was very, very strong. They've finally found a position which suits Trent from an attacking perspective, but also somehow makes them slightly more defensively solid, despite the fact that Trent is no longer sitting in at right back and is actually fitting into a midfield spot. I feel like it exposes him less defensively, and teams are going to find it more difficult to target Trent as a result. So I feel like that is a massive advantage. And I look at the signings that they've made as well. They're not world beaters, but they've made very smart signings. McAllister and Soboslai are absolutely, I think that's how you pronounce his name, by the way, are absolutely excellent signings. They are two dynamic number 8s, which is what they need. I know McAllister has played more as a 10 and as a 6 previously. I feel like he's absolutely suited to that number 8 role. We know Soboslai is an absolutely excellent number 8 too. And I feel like they will suit those Liverpool number 8 positions so well, because what we see from those number 8s is they have to support defensively, which both players can do, but they also have to have some attacking ability, because what we often see is they're almost playing as inside forwards, which is so funny why when we've seen Henderson play that role in the past, we're almost seeing Henderson further forward than Salah and more inside than Salah, whereas someone like a McAllister and a Soboslai, I feel like will play that role very, very well. So I like those two signings. And the other thing that I like about Liverpool is that they've now got all of their front players fit at the moment, at least. At large points last season, they were missing 3 or 4 of their attacking players. That was why they were having to play the likes of Harvey Elliott or Carvalho in those positions. They now have Diaz fit. They've got Jota fit. Darwin has just taken the number 9. Salah continues to put up ridiculous numbers in the Premier League too. So, and obviously Gakpo has been really, really solid through that number 9 position. So I feel like it's all coming together annoyingly for Liverpool. I feel like they've made the right signings. Everyone's fit. They've found a place for Trent. Their front line is looking very, very attacking. If they can start the season well, I bank on Klopp having a very, very good season with Liverpool, but I don't think they quite have enough at the moment to challenge for the Prem. One reason for that, and this is a very controversial opinion, I know, especially for a Liverpool fan, I really don't think Van Dijk is at it anymore. And I know they keep persisting with it because, well, the alternative isn't great. Matip has been really poor. Konate has shown he's a bit of a liability at points as well. But Van Dijk just hasn't looked at it. I hope for Liverpool fans' sake that once the team starts to improve, Van Dijk will have a bit of a surge in motivation. He just doesn't look like he can be bothered. And I know that's his style. It just worries me that they need to be defensively solid to finish 3rd or 2nd. And last season, for large parts, Matip, Konate and Van Dijk were getting absolutely ripped apart. So I've got Liverpool in 3rd, just above Manchester United, which means in 1st and 2nd, we have the same top 2 as last year. Let's see which way I've got them round. No surprises that the top 2 are Man City and Arsenal, and I guess no real surprises that it's Man City to win the league. I just think that they're too good. I really do. Arsenal had an exceptional season last year, and by all accounts, I genuinely believe that Man City had a poor season for them in the Premier League. They only accumulated 89 points, which in past seasons they absolutely surged past. They struggled for long spells where they were struggling to pick up points and their performances were really poor, whereas Arsenal, for the most part, performed well all season. And it still wasn't enough. So I think there will be an improvement in City this year. And I feel like there'll just be too much for anyone in and around them. However, Man City have sold Gundogan, who I do think is more important to City than some people realise. Looks like they could be selling Mahrez as well. There have been rumours that that Bernardo Silva could be off. Looks like Kyle Walker could also be off too. So they are selling a few of their key players, and it could be that they struggle a little bit as a result. But they have already signed Kovacic, who is probably in there to replace Gundogan. They have the likes of Phil Foden and Grealish, who are getting more seasons under their belt at City and have the opportunity to step up and have a really important part in that first team. Of course, they've got Alvarez and Haaland, who now have another season in the Prem and are another season older. So I still feel like City just have too much, and I have them winning the league. But let's just talk about Arsenal for a second, because my word, what is going on there is so, so exciting. I mean, Arteta, I don't mind Arteta. He's a bit dislikable at points, but let's get past that and just say that the team that he is building right now is scary. And I would be extremely shocked if Arsenal do not win the league in the next 3 seasons. I think that the fact that the age of that Arsenal team that he's building, but the quality at the same time is scary. I mean, the likes of Saliba, Timber, Ødegaard, Martinelli, Saka, Rice, Havertz. I mean, it is a young team, but also an experienced team with some real winners in there. I mean, 2 winners of European trophies coming in Rice and Havertz. Timber's obviously just signed as well. At the time we were recording this, it was just announced. So, I mean, they're only strengthening their team. The players that they had last season had invaluable experience going on a title run. And at large points, I mean, for the most of the year, they were top of the table. So even though it wasn't a successful experience, that experience is absolutely key. For if they do get to that point again, they're much, much less likely to struggle. I was going to say bottle it. I don't think they bottled it, but they're much less likely to struggle in the future. And they'll have that mental resilience to try and stay there in first. So I do expect them to challenge City. I'm not sure if it will go quite as close this year as it did last year, but I still expect them to be within 10 to 12 points by the end of the season. And if they did win the league, I wouldn't necessarily be shocked. I just think that City are a little bit too strong in my opinion. But Arsenal fans, very, very exciting time to be a fan. I wish Manchester United were in a similar position. I think we're just a few years off of that, unfortunately. So that is my prediction of the 20 teams. Take a glance at it, have a look. Feel free to screenshot and mug me off at the end of the year when it all goes terribly wrong. Just a caveat, again, this is an early prediction. So this might, if different teams sell and buy players, it might change my opinion. But I would love to know in the comments, what do you think the 20 teams will be? If you can be bothered to type out the 20 teams, please feel free to do so. And I'll look through all of the comments and see what you guys think. And if you can't be bothered to do that, maybe just predict the top 4 and the relegated 3 or something like that, just to give us a bit of an idea about the key points in the league. So thank you very much for watching. That is going to be it for today's video. If you have enjoyed today's video and you're new to the channel, please do subscribe. I'd massively appreciate it. Drop a like. And if you do want to see more of this content and you've watched to the end, please drop a comment down below to let me know that you enjoyed the video and that you want to see more of it. And if you guys don't, then we'll just leave it as a one-off video and go straight back to FPL. Thank you very much. Till next time. Bye-bye.